Fly in the Ointment by Thomas Cookson, published on the 13th of the 3rd, 19. Season 22 is often treated as the show's nadir, but was it really, or did it just get unfairly blighted by one nasty fly in the ointment? In hindsight, Attack of the Cybermen is a more entertaining season opener than its Davison predecessors, where we treat it as a bonfire purge of continuity fixation. Arguably everything afterwards is all progress. Vengeance on Virus wasn't interested in fan service, having more important things to say. Mark of the Rani wouldn't particularly confuse non-fans. The Two Doctors only benefits from Troughton and Fraser's presence. Finally, Revelation made the show seem it had advanced by light years, reaching the cusp of a renaissance of clarity. Unfortunately, the fact that Timelash immediately followed the suspension announcement made it easy to believe Grade's judgment was vindicated and more comfortable to simply treat Collins' run as sour grapes that demonstrated the makers were running out of workable scripts anyway. Timelash isn't irredeemable so much as persistently unrewarding of redemptive readings. I understand why fans feel it sinks the season, while Revelation's cutting-edge maturity feels already cancelled out by this sloppy pantomime. The 1980s was a time when fandom had convinced itself of its own bullshit, into believing even Warriors of the Deep was meaningful. With Timelash they couldn't anymore. Arguably the standard model for 1980s Who should have been the Five Doctors, which blended classic monsters of cheerful, broad appeal, family roleplay adventure, gave Davison his sense seal of respectability, making him finally seem more than the sum of his parts. For at last like the successful relaunch JNT should have started on rather than taking 3 cumbersome seasons to reach. Season 22 overtly adopts the Five Doctors model, but with unpleasant fluctuations between more nasty adult sci-fi and moments of moronic childish pantomime. All it really seems to have inspired is unimaginative TARDIS bickering over the now tedious Eye of Orion destination and more unprecedented sidestepping into the nexus of past Doctors' ongoing business, Mondas, Carfel, Androgums. Sometimes Who serials can deliver more than a given story. Pyramids of Mars gives us a thrilling on-screen adventure, but also subtly conveys a wider, unseen ancient story of Osiris mythology. Timelash is not into an untelevised Pertwee adventure. Sadly, both fails as a story in its own right, and makes the unseen Pertwee adventure feel just as calamitous and sloppy. When Pertwee described once coming to Draconia's aid, you could imagine any indeterminate, faceless doctor fulfilling the role, making it feel mythic. Here the anal retentive specifics constrain our imagination. We're told how to envision this story on specific superficial details rather than invited to. Referring to a specific slot in series history rather than conjuring the Doctor's ancient life, we know this past adventure doesn't exist, exposing how the writer is trying too hard to convince us of its authenticity. It feels contrived and rings false, spoiling the illusion. It's an unbelievable contrivance. Perry happens to recognize Joe's photograph from memory at a crucial moment. Timelash lacks Season 22's notorious video nasty content, but otherwise represents everything contentious about that season. Cheap production values, not particularly a Season 22 phenomenon, pointless bickering, Perry lasted after by the villain. It's endemic of those traits because the script's 50% Saywards, its underrunning material necessitated Saywards extra padding. Colin wanted to convey the Doctor's hidden depth, suggesting a greater cohesive whole more than the sum of his parts, something Davison failed to, but here his childish bickering of Perry is just ear-piercingly painful. Colin's unprovoked volatile outbursts further giving their relationship abusive undertones. Yes, this was a time when Dirty Den and Angie's on-screen acrimonious meltdown was gaining EastEnders record ratings. For those are well-crafted, complicated human characters drawn from life, with electric combustible friction, saying something liberatingly cathartic. Colin's nastier characterization was too relentlessly one-way and really only contrived as JNT's response to Longleat attendees downrating Davison as bland. Colin's Doctor was intended as the loud, aggressive reductio ad absurdum of those fan wishes. Some in the mood for something Kish may enjoy Timelash and be entertained, at least while his tech is alive. His mocking for Dayglow sock ambassador is almost worth the DVD price alone. Its cheap production being almost reassuring, were it better made, it'd have standards to fall depressingly short of. It almost becomes momentarily comforting to accept Doctor Who being occasionally rubbish, but then follows the nasty aftertaste of wondering if therefore the writers who penned Genesis City of Death Enlightenment almost shouldn't have bothered. A.D. Morrison highlighted how Snake Dance and Enlightenment pushed early 80s Who into unprecedented meditative philosophical terrain. From that angle, I understand how Timelash seemed a regressive betrayal. Tatwood heeded caution over praising Timelash for merely trying to be humorously playful, after a long stretch of po-faced, excessively grim stories that had sacrificed entertainment value for incoherent, moribund moral lecturings. But Timelash tries so outrageously heavy-handedly to raise laughs that you almost feel a force at gunpoint to laugh. There's no subtlety to the moronic humour. It's just nervous energy. So jolting and bombarding that you almost end up laughing nervously yourself to release the burden. I might watch this, be amusingly entertained, and afterwards be unable to remember why. Unlike City of Death, there's subtler reasons you forget its best comedy moment. Where there's subtler reasons you forget its best comedy moments, and rewatches reward you with jokes and deliveries you missed first time. There's no doubt where any comedy moments are here, given how brutally overstated they are. Vengeance on Virus, which J&T disliked, and Revelation, where Eric's attempts to commission something different and edgy. Timelash is unmistakably the product of J&T's sensibilities. His notional criteria of trademark Doctor Who that's like Doctor Who, existing simply to be a pat, generic adventure with authenticating continuity references. It lacks what made Genesis or City of Death potent. The sense of history in the making, human endeavour, and brave, crucial decisions making a difference. The underwater menace and Genesis of the Daleks' camp sensibilities, giant clams, excuse me, can you help me? I'm a spy, were utilised as a tool for mocking the rigidity of authoritarian conformity. Sayer profoundly disliked that camp sensibility, his inclination being toward power worship, without realising it couldn't be exorcised completely. Like Warriors of the Deep, Timelash's camp moments had almost nothing triumphant about them. The mean-spirited writing reflected how Sayward wanted this camp spirit to die. That's why Timelash's humour is so horrid. The comedy is nothing to attack, it's just slapped on inanely and belligerently. Timelash is inspirational like Who at its best was, in ways that secured its lasting residual affection. Perhaps the rallying call against tyranny and not being cowed by fear, with Colin braving the Timelash to retrieve the crystals, might inspire elated feelings. Colin's invisibility demonstration might inspire kids to read The Invisible Man, but even that seems to belong in a better story. In moments like, you give me your word, you microcephalic apostate, we briefly see the Sixth Doctor this nasty universe needs, the perfect underdog snob who turns his well-learned vicious tongue against the elitists in support of the downtrodden. There's aspects reminiscent of Genesis, the two warring civilizations, quiet rebel conspiracies against a dictator, all of which Part 2 throws away with a disposability that makes Timelash feel derivatively patched together from Doctor Who's arsenal of generic fodder, further cementing Season 22 as tired and uninspired. Pennant Roberts repeats his mistake from the Pirate Planet's cliffhanger, where Tom's forced to walk the plank, shooting from a distant, unengaged angle, making it resemble a slapstick moment rather than putting us with him on that mighty drop's edge. Likewise, Pennant films the march to the Timelash in flat, wide exposure, doing nothing to hide how easily Colin can dodge the entrance's narrow mouth. There's a problem when the story's central threat doesn't feel the least bit exciting or foreboding, but the tide immediately turns too much in the Doctor's favour. It becomes impossible caring about the reduced stakes when victory keeps falling in his lap. Eventually the story contrives a tacked-on doomsday missile strike, compelling the Doctor's equally ludicrous leap of willing martyrdom. Colin's compassion for Peri finally reveals itself, but his outright lifting her out the TARDIS is downright cringeworthy. In Genesis, when Sarah urged Beta not to detonate upon seeing the Doctor fleeing, it was poignant, but Peri begging him not to go feels uncomfortably like she's pathetically determined to preserve her abuser. Her pitiful deference, above all, is what makes their dynamic so unrelatable and unsettling to watch. Frankly, I wish Colin would have dumped Peri and travelled with Ernest Young Herbert instead. Colin's old-fashioned stoic heroism seems preferable to Tennant's spiteful, ranted Wilf in The End of Time, essentially RTD's toxic sentimentality reaching its horrible conclusion, demanding we empathise with someone's contemptful behaviour because of their bad day, otherwise we're not fans. If anything, Wilf should have earned from Tennant the same loyalty and respect Wilf demonstrated to him throughout. But Colin's self-sacrifice is too flippantly done to feel heroic. It's merely childish machismo. We're never fooled he was in danger of dying. Colin's character is still a mess, distorted by the season's moral confusion. Had the Doctor's crystal instantaneously refracted the Borad's laser back at him, that'd be clear self-defense. Instead, Colin holds and aims it deliberately until it discharges at the helpless chair-bound foe. How that's morally better than firing a gun at him? It's a moronic claim of the moral high ground. The cheapness of Colin's gloating contempt for the Borad's deformity is depressingly ugly to sit through. The once enlightened, intelligent Doctor now defeating his enemy by telling him he's ugly and will never get a girlfriend. This isn't just cheap, tacky production, it has a thoroughly tacky spirit. I have since Timelash wanted to reflect how Stalin's childhood smallpox shaped his overcompensating, vicious, psychotic nature. Despite initially promising to get away from Season 17 material, J&T had now come to think Doctor Who was about mandatory rubber monsters, female eye candy, and the Master's annual reappearance. The point of stories became irrelevant beyond a routine of tacky cliches J&T believed were now important traditions. J&T insisted on making his doctors fallible or unstable, yet through the companion's subservience, staunchly maintaining he is the protagonist we're obligated to agree with, regardless how horribly or reprehensibly wrong he gets it. The era's sexism and skewed sense of justice went hand in hand, deriding any sense of equality and fairness and reveling in oppressive ignorance. While his previous companions followed the Doctor's lead because his cause was righteous, Tegan and Perry appeared brainwashed into following their dangerous liability of a Doctor. Perry's treatment here is appallingly misogynistic and degrading. She's leashed like a dog, reduced to a peril monkey. Even the resolution requires her screaming at the Borad's ugliness. I've argued old-fashioned heroes rescuing frantic damsels can have erotic friction, but it's done to excesses that feel slimy and dirty. Perry being constantly victimized renders this an ugly, unpleasantly masochistic experience. It's hard to imagine previous companions being treated so contemptfully, leaving viewers wondering if it's worth investing any sympathy in her. The writers clearly didn't. In 1985, Madonna's cheeky sexual confidence made many girls champion and emulate her. Likewise, anime fangirls lapped up their voluptuous heroines. Perry looks transparently uncomfortable being a sex object. Few women envied her. They could only cringe for Perry. Furthermore, her constant damseling screaming at rubbish monsters/androids only reinforced how terrifying this era wasn't. If any story left Cornell ashamed of Kazuku's sexism, it's probably Timelash. Following the suspension announcement, Timelash confirmed how backwards the show's sexual politics had fallen post-Warriors Gate. Moffat's feminist critics argue objectionable messages/worldviews can emerge in storytelling despite a writer's better intentions. They're still a cultural conduit. Here the sexism so blatant it begs what anyone was thinking. Timelash depicts masculine entitlement and brutal, cavalier, animalistic mating rituals. We were never fooled who are watching an intelligent rendering of that theme. If we were, Perry would have been allowed to be more than a victim here.